Hello, everyone, and welcome to Endless Romance. Dear friends, what if everything you believed about your life was a lie? What if the love you built your world around shattered in an instant? Could you find the strength to start over? Claire Reynolds thought she had the perfect life, until a single betrayal changed everything. Left to pick up the pieces, she faced the hardest question of all: who am I without the man I once loved? This is a story of resilience, redemption, and the unexpected beauty of second chances. Stay with me, because sometimes, the end of one story is just the beginning of another. Now, let's listen to her story.
I used to believe in fairy tales. Not the kind with princes and castles, but the ones where love conquers all, where two people meet, fall in love, build a life together, and grow old side by side. I believed in love that was steady, unwavering, the kind that anchored you in a storm. For a long time I thought I had that. My name is Claire Reynolds, and once upon a time I had the kind of life people envy. I was born and raised in Savannah, Georgia, a city where history lingers in the air like the scent of magnolias after a summer rain. My childhood was filled with long, lazy afternoons beneath the towering oak trees, where Spanish moss swayed in the breeze like silk ribbons. I grew up believing in tradition, in family, in the power of love. David Reynolds walked into my life when I was 17, on the kind of golden autumn afternoon that makes you believe the world is exactly as it should be. He was the boy next door, charming, confident, with a smile that could make you forget your own name. He had this way of making you feel like the only person in the room, as if the world faded whenever he looked at you. I fell for him the way young girls do, completely, recklessly, without hesitation. We dated through senior year, and when he proposed at the end of our sophomore year of college, I said yes before he even finished asking. We married at St. John's Cathedral in Savannah, the same church where my parents had exchanged vows decades before. The day was perfect, just as I had imagined it would be, the air thick with the scent of gardenias, the afternoon sun casting a golden glow through the stained glass windows. I remember standing at the altar, my fingers wrapped tightly around David's as we promised forever. And I believed it. God, how I believed it. We moved to Charleston, South Carolina, after David got a job with a respected law firm. We bought a 2-story colonial house just outside the city, with white shutters and a front porch big enough for a swing. It had creaky wooden floors and a backyard with a towering oak tree that would later hold a tire swing for our children. I spent hours decorating, choosing the perfect shade of blue for the kitchen, picking out curtains that caught the morning light just right. It was our first home, and I loved it fiercely. Our life together felt like something out of a novel. David worked hard, and I supported him, never once questioning the late nights or the business trips. I taught literature at a local college, pouring my love for words into students who still believed in stories that ended happily ever after. And then came the children, first Lily, with her father's dark eyes and my unruly curls. 2 years later, Jacob, our wild-hearted boy who never met a tree he didn't want to climb. And then years later, when I thought our family was complete, along came Sophia, a surprise wrapped in pink blankets and sleepy smiles. Motherhood changed me. It softened the sharp edges, made the world feel both bigger and smaller at the same time. My days became a blur of midnight feedings, scraped knees, bedtime stories, and school drop-offs. There were ballet recitals and soccer games, birthday parties with balloons tied to every chair, the smell of birthday cake lingering in the house long after the guests had gone home. Life was busy, sometimes chaotic, but it was ours. It was good. I can still picture those early mornings standing by the kitchen window, a cup of coffee warm in my hands, watching the sunrise paint the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. I remember the sound of little feet running down the hall, of David's laughter as he scooped the kids into his arms. If someone had told me then that it would all fall apart, I wouldn't have believed them, because back then I thought love was enough. Looking back, I wonder if there were signs I ignored, little cracks in the foundation of our marriage that I chose not to see. Maybe it was the way David's smile didn't reach his eyes as often. Maybe it was the way his touch grew absent-minded, the way he kissed me out of habit rather than desire. Or maybe it was simply that we had built a life so full that we forgot to leave room for each other. But at the time I didn't notice. Or maybe I didn't want to. We had been married for almost 15 years when everything changed. I remember the exact moment, the way you remember the details of a car crash, the way time slows just before impact. It was a humid July afternoon. the air so thick with heat that even the cicadas had gone quiet. The kids were at a friend's house, and I was folding laundry in our bedroom, the hum of the ceiling fan drowning out the silence. David's phone buzzed on the nightstand. It wasn't unusual his work phone rang constantly, but something about this felt different. Maybe it was the way the screen lit up with just a name, no last name, no context. Anna. I don't know why I picked it up. Maybe I already knew deep down. The message was simple. Miss you. Can't wait to see you tonight. There are moments in life that divide everything into before and after. That was mine. I stood there for what felt like hours, my heart pounding so loudly I thought I might be sick. I read the message over and over, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less damning. But they didn't. They stayed exactly the same, burning into my brain, branding themselves into my skin. When David came home that night, I didn't say anything. Not at first. I set the table, lit the candles like I always did, served dinner as if I hadn't just discovered that my entire life was a lie. The kids laughed, unaware, and David sat across from me, his smile easy, his voice steady. I studied him, wondering how long he had been lying to me, how long he had been looking me in the eye and telling me he loved me while loving someone else. I confronted him later, after the kids were asleep, when the house was quiet except for the sound of the summer rain tapping against the windows. I held up his phone, showed him the message, waited for him to deny it. He didn't. He just stood there silent, and I knew. He had been cheating on me. And the life I had spent 15 years building had just crumbled beneath my feet. There's a moment right after your heart breaks when everything feels still, as if the world is waiting for you to react. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at him, at this man I had loved since I was 17, and wondered how I had been so blind. I wanted to ask him why. I wanted to know if he had ever really loved me, if our life had meant anything to him, or if it had all just been a beautiful lie. But in the end, the only words that came out were a whisper. How long? A year. A year. 365 days of lies. That night I packed a suitcase. I took the kids and drove to my parents' house, the same house where I had once dreamed of love that lasted forever. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I wasn't the girl who believed in fairy tales, because fairy tales weren't real. And love? Love wasn't enough. I don't remember much about the drive to my parents' house that night, only that the road seemed longer than it had ever been before. The rain had picked up, the wipers slashing back and forth across the windshield in a rhythm that matched the pounding in my chest. The kids had fallen asleep in the back seat, blissfully unaware that their world was about to change forever. I envied them their innocence, their belief that home was a place that would always be safe. I wished I could protect them from the storm that was coming, but deep down, I knew that was impossible. My parents still lived in the same white colonial house on the outskirts of Savannah, the one I grew up in. My mother was waiting at the door when I pulled into the driveway, her robe cinched tight around her waist, her face pinched with concern. I hadn't called ahead, I couldn't. I had barely been able to put the car in drive, let alone form words. But somehow she knew. She took one look at my face and pulled me into her arms. "Oh baby," she whispered. "What happened?" But I couldn't answer, because if I said the words out loud it would make them real. I settled the kids in my old bedroom, tucking them under the floral quilt that still smelled faintly of childhood. They didn't stir. Lily curled into a ball, Jacob sprawled across the mattress, and little Sophia clutched her stuffed rabbit, oblivious to the way the ground had just cracked beneath us. I stood there for a long time watching them sleep, wondering how I would ever tell them. How do you explain that the family they had always known, the family they trusted, was gone? I found my mother in the kitchen, the way I always did in times of crisis. The overhead light cast a warm glow across the countertops, and the kettle was already steaming, as if she had sensed that this night would call for something stronger than words. "Claire," she said softly, "tell me." So I did. I told her everything, the late nights, the message on David's phone, the look in his eyes when he confirmed what I had already known in my gut. I told her about the way my hands had shaken as I packed my bags, the way I had forced myself to keep breathing 1 second at a time. And when I finished, when there was nothing left but the hollow ache in my chest, she reached across the table and took my hands in hers. "You're stronger than this," she said. "You'll get through it." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to take her words and wrap them around myself like armor. But in that moment I didn't feel strong. I felt like I was drowning. The days that followed blurred together. I stayed at my parents' house, moving through the motions of life like a ghost. I took the kids to school, I cooked dinner, I smiled when I had to. But inside I was crumbling. Every night after the house fell silent, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of my marriage, searching for the exact point when it had all gone wrong. Had it been a slow unraveling? Had David fallen out of love with me piece by piece, year by year until there was nothing left? Or had it happened all at once, in the span of a single night, a single kiss, a single bad decision? I tortured myself with questions that had no answers. And then came the hardest part, telling the kids. I had rehearsed the conversation 1,000 times, but nothing could have prepared me for the way their faces fell when I said the words. Your dad and I aren't going to be together anymore. Lily was the first to react. She was 12, old enough to understand but too young to process it. Her eyes filled with tears, and she looked at me like I had just told her the world was ending. But why? She whispered. Did we do something wrong? Jacob, at 10, sat in silence, his little hands clenched into fists. He wouldn't cry, not in front of me. That was something he got from David. And Sophia, sweet, innocent Sophia, just looked between us, confusion written all over her face. But Daddy loves you, she said. He tells me every night. I swallowed the lump in my throat, forcing myself to stay strong. He does love you, I assured them, and he always will. But sometimes love isn't enough to keep two people together. It felt like the biggest lie I had ever told. The weeks passed and David and I worked out a custody arrangement. He moved into a condo in downtown Charleston, and for the first time in 15 years I slept alone. The bed felt too big, too cold, and every morning I woke up expecting to find him there beside me. But he never was. I tried to hate him. God, I wanted to hate him. I wanted to take all of my pain, all of my anger, and direct it at him like a weapon. But I couldn't, because even after everything, a part of me still loved him. And that was the cruelest part of it all. One evening, about a month after I left, he showed up at my parents' house. The kids had just gone to bed, and I was sitting on the back porch, nursing a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. I heard his footsteps before I saw him. Claire, he said, hesitating in the doorway. Can we talk? I wanted to tell him no. I wanted to tell him to turn around and walk away, that he had lost the right to talk to me the moment he let someone else into our marriage. But instead I nodded. He sat down beside me, his hands clasped together, his wedding ring still on his finger. I hadn't worn mine in weeks. I never meant to hurt you, he said. I let out a bitter laugh. That doesn't change the fact that you did. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. I don't know how to fix this, he admitted. You can't, I said simply. There's no fixing this, David. We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of everything that had been left unsaid hanging between us. Finally, he spoke again. I still love you, Claire. And that was the moment I realized the truth. Maybe you do, I said. But not enough. Because if he had, we wouldn't be here. If he had, he would have chosen me. He left that night without another word, and I let him go. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. There was no dramatic courtroom battle. No screaming matches over who got what. Just a quiet legal ending to a marriage that had once been everything to me. People say that time heals all wounds, but I don't think that's true. Some wounds don't heal. They just become a part of you, woven into the fabric of who you are. I wasn't the same woman I had been before, but I wasn't broken either. And that was the beginning of something new. Heartbreak is a peculiar thing. It doesn't come all at once like a crashing wave, sweeping you off your feet and pulling you under. No, it comes in pieces, in quiet moments, in the spaces between what was and what will never be again. In the beginning, I thought the worst part would be leaving David. The moment I walked out of our home, suitcase in hand, I expected to feel a finality, as if the pain would be contained to that single act. But it didn't work that way. The pain didn't end when I shut the door behind me. It followed me. It seeped into the walls of my parents' house, curled up next to me in bed at night, whispered in my ear when I was alone in the car. The mornings were the hardest. I had spent 15 years waking up next to him, 15 years of half-conscious murmurs and warm hands reaching for me in the dark. Now I woke up to silence. The space beside me was cold, untouched. I told myself I would get used to it, that eventually I would stop expecting him to be there. But every morning my body betrayed me before my mind could catch up. My hand would reach for him, only to grasp empty sheets, and for a few disorienting seconds I would forget. Then I would remember. And the remembering hurt more than anything else. The first few weeks after I left, I moved through the days like a ghost. I took the kids to school, made dinner, folded laundry, all while feeling as if I were watching someone else live my life. My mother hovered, watching me with the careful gaze of someone waiting for a storm to break. She knew me too well. She knew that I wasn't okay, no matter how well I pretended. "You need to talk about it, Claire," she said one evening as she set a cup of tea in front of me. "There's nothing to talk about," I replied. She sighed, settling into the chair across from me. "You can't bury this. It'll eat you alive." I looked down at the tea, at the way the steam curled in the air. Maybe that's what I deserve. She reached across the table and took my hand, squeezing it gently. "No one deserves this," she whispered. But in those days I wasn't sure I believed her. I spent a lot of time lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of my marriage, searching for the exact point where it had all gone wrong. I wanted a reason, a clear moment that I could point to and say, "There. That's where we lost each other." But I never found it. There was no single moment, no catastrophic event that had shattered us. It had been gradual, like sand slipping through my fingers, so slowly that I hadn't even noticed until it was gone. Grief comes in waves, and mine hit at the most unexpected times. The first time I went to the grocery store without him, I found myself reaching for his favorite brand of coffee before remembering that he wouldn't be there to drink it. I stood in the aisle staring at the bag in my hands and had to fight the urge to sink to the floor. The worst was when I saw couples together at the park, at the F, in the aisles of the grocery store, laughing over some private joke. I hated them. Not because they had done anything wrong, but because they had something I had lost. I hated their easy intimacy, the way they touched without hesitation, the way their hands found each other like second nature. David and I used to be like that. And now we were nothing. I stopped answering calls from friends. They meant well, but their sympathy was suffocating. I didn't want to hear how sorry they were, how shocked they were, how they never would have guessed. I didn't want their reassurances that I would be okay, that I would move on, that one day I would find someone new. I didn't want someone new. I wanted my old life back. But the cruelest part of heartbreak is that there is no going back. I found myself avoiding mirrors. I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. She looked hollow, her eyes bruised with exhaustion, her cheekbones sharper than they had been before. I had lost weight without realizing it, my clothes hanging looser than they used to. I barely ate, barely slept. Everything tasted like nothing. One night, after putting the kids to bed, I found myself in the bathroom, staring at my reflection. I pressed my palms against the sink, taking in the woman I had become. "Who are you?" I whispered. The woman in the mirror didn't answer. I started sleeping with the TV on, needing the noise to drown out the thoughts that crept in during the quiet. It didn't matter what was playing, late-night sitcom reruns, old movies I had seen 100 times. Anything was better than the silence. The silence was unbearable. The silence was where the memories lived. The only thing that forced me to keep going was the kids. I couldn't fall apart in front of them. They had already lost one version of their family. I refused to let them lose me, too. So I faked it. I smiled when I needed to. I helped with homework, packed lunches, read bedtime stories with a steady voice. But the moment they were asleep, the mask fell away, and I was left alone with the ruins. One night, about 2 months after the separation, I found myself driving with no destination in mind. The kids were spending the weekend with David, and the house had felt too empty, too still. I just needed to move, to escape the walls that felt like they were closing in on me. I ended up at the beach. It wasn't planned, I just drove until I ran out of road. The moon was high, casting silver light across the water, the waves rolling in steady and endless. I kicked off my shoes and walked down to the shoreline, the wet sand cold beneath my feet. I stood there for a long time watching the waves, and then for the first time since it happened, I let myself break. I sank to my knees, the salty air thick in my lungs, and sobbed. I cried for the years I had given to a man who had thrown them away. I cried for the life I had built, the home I had loved, the dreams that would never come true. I cried for the girl I used to be, the one who had believed in forever. And when there were no more tears left, when my body was exhausted from the weight of it all, I sat there, staring out at the horizon, listening to the steady rhythm of the ocean. It occurred to me then that the tide would keep coming in no matter what. The world would keep turning. Life would go on. And so would I. I wasn't ready yet, but someday I would be. I drove home that night, salty and shivering, but feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The pain was still there, but it no longer felt like it was swallowing me whole. The next morning, I woke up and made a decision. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep letting the past define me. So I got out of bed. I made coffee. I took a long shower, washing away the remnants of the night before. And then for the first time in months, I opened my laptop and searched for jobs. It was time to start over. Starting over is a funny thing. People talk about it like it's this grand defining moment, like you wake up one day, decide to move on, and suddenly the weight of the past is gone. But it doesn't work that way. Healing isn't an epiphany. It's 1,000 tiny moments of choosing to live again. For me, it started with something small. That morning after my night on the beach, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, staring at the blank search bar. I hadn't applied for a job in over a decade. For 15 years, my entire identity had been wrapped up in being David's wife, in being a mother. And now, with my marriage gone and my children splitting time between two homes, I felt like I had lost both. But I wasn't just a wife. I wasn't just a mother. I was still Claire. I just had to find her again. I typed the words literature professor jobs in Charleston and hit enter. The fear of beginning again. Returning to work after so many years away was terrifying. I had spent so long in the comfort of my old life that I had forgotten what it felt like to stand on my own. The day of my first interview, I stood in front of the mirror, trying to convince myself that I still belonged in the world beyond carpool lines and PDA meetings. I pulled my shoulders back, smoothed down my navy blouse, and whispered, "You can do this." But the moment I walked into the college, the fear crept back in. I saw students rushing to class, their arms full of books, their conversations spilling through the hallways in bursts of laughter and nervous energy. I remembered what it felt like to be them, to be young, to be on the brink of something, to believe that life was limitless. I had once stood where they stood, full of dreams about love and career, and the kind of life I wanted to build. And I had built it, only to watch it crumble. By the time I reached the dean's office, my hands were shaking. But then something strange happened. As I sat down across from him, he smiled warmly and said, "Claire Reynolds, I remember you." It turned out that the dean, Dr. Jonathan Hayes, had been one of my professors when I was a student here. He had graded my papers, listened to my debates in class, even pulled me aside once and told me I had a gift for storytelling. "You were one of my best students," he said, flipping through my RSum. "Why did you stop teaching?" I hesitated. How do you explain that you put your dreams on hold for a man who didn't choose you in the end? That you gave up a career you loved because you thought marriage was forever? "Life happened," I said finally. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Well, it's good to have you back." And just like that, I was hired. Stepping into a new life. That first semester was brutal. Balancing a career with single motherhood was like juggling knives, and most days I felt like I was failing at both. I would wake up at dawn, make breakfast, pack lunches, and drop the kids off at school before rushing to campus, where I would spend hours lecturing on the beauty of words, of storytelling, of how literature has the power to shape our lives. Then I'd rush home, make dinner, help with homework, do laundry, and collapse into bed exhausted. It was overwhelming, but it was also the first time in years that I felt alive. Teaching reminded me of who I used to be, the girl who devoured books, who stayed up late writing stories, who believed in the magic of words. Every time I stood in front of a classroom, discussing Fitzgerald's Longing in The Great Gatsby or the quiet strength of Jane Austen's heroines, I felt a flicker of the passion I had buried for so long. I started laughing more, smiling more. And for the first time since David's betrayal, I went entire days without thinking about him, facing the past. Of course, moving forward didn't mean the past had let me go. David and I still had to navigate co-parenting, which meant constant, unavoidable interactions. Some were civil, some were strained, and some cut me open in ways I wasn't prepared for. One afternoon, I was at the grocery store when I saw him. He was in the produce section, standing beside a woman with honey blonde hair, and a figure that made my stomach twist involuntarily. They were laughing, leaning into each other in the easy way that couples do. I felt like I had been punched. For months I had convinced myself that I was over it, that I had moved on, that he was just a part of my past. But standing there, watching him touch another woman the way he used to touch me, I realized something painful and undeniable. Just because you've healed doesn't mean the scars don't ache. I turned around before he could see me and left my cart in the middle of the aisle. I drove straight to my parents' house, locked myself in my childhood bedroom, and cried for the first time in months. I cried because he had moved on. I cried because deep down I wasn't sure if I ever truly would. But then as I wiped my eyes and looked around the room, I saw something that changed everything. Sitting on my old bookshelf was a framed photo of me at 22, standing outside my college dorm, beaming with excitement about the future. That girl had dreams. She had ambitions. She had been someone before David, and she could be someone after him too. The first sparks of something new. The first time I met Elliot Carter, I wasn't looking for love. He was another professor at the college, a historian with warm brown eyes and a quiet confidence. He had a habit of drumming his fingers against the desk while he lectured, and his students adored him. The first time he spoke to me, I was in the faculty lounge, staring into my coffee like it held the answers to the universe. "Rough morning?" he asked, leaning against the counter. I glanced up at him, startled. "Something like that." He smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "They get easier." I wanted to tell him that nothing about my life felt easy, but instead, I just nodded. We started talking more after that, first in passing, then over coffee, then in long conversations after work. He didn't push. He didn't rush. He just listened. And for the first time since David, I felt seen. Choosing myself. Months passed. I grew stronger. My life, once defined by loss, began to feel full again. Lily, Jacob, and Sophia adjusted. There were still hard days when they asked why things couldn't go back to the way they were, when they missed the way life used to be. But I reminded them again and again that we weren't broken. We were just different. And I reminded myself too. The day I signed the final papers for the sale of the house David and I had once shared, I drove to the beach, the same place where I had fallen apart months before. But this time I didn't cry. I just stood there, toes sinking into the sand, watching the tide roll in, steady and unshaken. And I realized something. I had spent so much time mourning the life I lost that I had forgotten to embrace the life still waiting for me. So I took a deep breath. I let go. And I stepped forward into the future. Life has a way of moving forward. Even when you're not sure you're ready for it. It doesn't wait for you to heal. It doesn't pause while you catch your breath. It just keeps going, dragging you along whether you want to move or not. By the time a year had passed since my divorce, I had settled into something resembling normalcy. It wasn't the life I had imagined for myself, but it was a life I could live with. I had a job I loved, my kids were adjusting, and I had even started allowing myself to smile more. But life, as I had learned the hard way, has a cruel sense of timing. I never expected that my past, the one I had worked so hard to bury, would come back for me. I never expected that the one secret I had sworn I would never tell would demand to be spoken aloud. But the thing about secrets is that they don't stay buried forever. Especially not the kind that shape the person you become. The call that changed everything started with a phone call. I was in my office at the college, sipping a cup of coffee and grading essays on Pride and Prejudice, when my phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar. Claire. The voice on the other end was hesitant, like someone testing the waters before diving in. "Yes, this is Claire." A pause. And then, "It's Maggie." My breath caught in my throat. Maggie. My sister. My estranged sister. We hadn't spoken in nearly 6 years. Not since our mother's funeral. Not since the last time I had let myself look at the past I tried so hard to forget. "I need to see you," she said. I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell her that whatever she had to say, I didn't need to hear it. But I couldn't. Because no matter how much distance had grown between us, she was still my sister. "Come by the house," I said before I could stop myself. A reunion full of ghosts. That evening, when Maggie knocked on my door, I almost didn't open it. I stood there, my hand hovering over the doorknob, my heart pounding in my chest. When I finally pulled it open, The sight of her nearly knocked the air from my lungs. She looked the same yet different. The years had softened her, but there was still that edge to her, that quiet strength that had always made her seem so unbreakable. "You look good, Claire," she said softly. I didn't know how to respond to that. I stepped aside, letting her in. The house was quiet, the kids at David's for the weekend. I led her to the kitchen, where a bottle of wine was already open. I poured her a glass, not speaking, waiting for her to tell me why she was here. Maggie had never been one to ease into things. "I saw him," she said. The room felt like it shrank. I didn't have to ask who she meant. I knew. "Where?" My voice came out hoarse. "A few weeks ago. In Charleston." She paused, watching me carefully. "He asked about you." I gripped the edge of the table. Maggie dash. "Claire, he doesn't know. He doesn't know the truth. The truth. The truth I had spent decades trying to forget. The truth I had sworn I would never say aloud. The past that refused to stay buried. I was 17 the first time it happened. I had always thought of childhood as something sacred, a time meant to be filled with scraped knees and whispered secrets, summer nights and dreams about the future. But mine had been stolen, taken from me by someone who was supposed to protect me, Uncle Tom. I never spoke his name. Even now, all these years later, it felt like something toxic on my tongue. He was my father's brother. He had always been around family gatherings, holidays, barbecues in the backyard. He was the kind of man people trusted, the kind of man no one would have suspected. The first time I thought I had imagined it. The way his hands lingered too long on my shoulder. The way his fingers brushed against me in ways that didn't feel right. But then it happened again. And again. Until I couldn't pretend anymore. I told my mother once. She told me I must have misunderstood. He's family, Claire. He wouldn't do something like that. So I learned to keep quiet. I learned to smile at Christmas dinners and pretend I didn't feel his eyes on me across the table. I learned how to make myself small, how to disappear even when I was standing in the middle of the room. It wasn't until years later when I met David that I thought I had finally escaped it, that I could create a new life, one untouched by the past. But secrets don't stay buried forever. And now, standing in my kitchen, looking into my sister's eyes, I knew that mine was clawing its way to the surface. The weight of the truth. "You have to tell him," Maggie said. I shook my head. "No. He doesn't need to know. He deserves to know." I clenched my jaw. What good would it do? It's not about what's easy, Claire. It's about what's right. I hated that she was right. I had spent my whole life running from the truth. But maybe it was time to stop running. Facing the past. A week later, I sat in a cafe in downtown Charleston waiting. My hands trembled as I wrapped them around my coffee cup, my stomach a knot of nerves. And then he walked in. Elliot, the man I had loved before I had ever known what love really was. He sat across from me, studying me with the same warmth he always had. "You look good, Claire." I let out a shaky breath. "I need to tell you something," I said. And then, for the first time in my life, I told the whole story. I told him about Tom, about the fear, the shame, the years of silence. I told him about the way I had buried it so deep inside me that I had convinced myself it didn't matter anymore. When I was done, he sat there for a long time, his expression unreadable. "Claire." His voice broke, and I realized he had tears in his eyes. "I wish I had known. I didn't want you to." He reached across the table, taking my hands in his. "You're stronger than you think." And for the first time in my life, I believed it. The beginning of something new. Telling the truth didn't erase the past. It didn't take away the years of pain. But it set me free. I had spent my whole life carrying a weight that wasn't mine to bear. And now finally I was putting it down. Elliot and I kept talking. He didn't push, didn't demand more than I was ready to give. But for the first time, I saw a future that didn't terrify me. A future where I wasn't just surviving. A future where I was living. And for the first time in a long, long time, that felt like enough. Healing isn't linear. No one tells you that when you first start putting the pieces of yourself back together. You expect a steady climb, a clear path forward. But in reality, healing is messy. It's full of steps forward and stumbles back. Of days when you feel invincible and nights when the weight of the past still presses against your chest. I had spent so much of my life defining myself by what I had lost: my childhood, my marriage, the dreams I once had of a love that would last forever. But as the weeks passed after my conversation with Elliot, I found myself wondering if maybe, just maybe, there was still something left to find. I hadn't expected him to stay. I hadn't expected him to keep calling, to keep showing up, to keep looking at me as if I wasn't broken. But he did. And that terrified me. The walls we build. The first time Elliot asked me out to dinner, I hesitated. "It doesn't have to be anything serious," he said, leaning against my office door, his hands in his pockets, his expression easy but careful. He knew me well enough by now to know that pushing me would only make me pull away. "I don't know if I'm ready," I admitted. "That's okay," he said. "It's just dinner, Claire." But we both knew it wasn't just dinner. Because letting someone in really in meant trusting that they wouldn't leave. And I wasn't sure I could do that again. For years, I had built walls around myself, walls designed to protect me from the kind of pain I had barely survived. Letting someone in meant opening the door to the possibility of heartbreak. It meant risking everything. But for the first time in a long time, I wondered, what if it also meant something good? A night that felt different. I said yes. We met at a small, candlelit restaurant by the water, the kind of place I had once dreamed of going to with David but never did. I had forgotten what it felt like to sit across from a man who actually listened, who didn't check his phone every few minutes, who wasn't distracted, who wasn't looking for a way out. "You look nervous," Elliot said, smiling as he poured me a glass of wine. "That's because I am." He nodded as if he understood. Maybe he did. "It's been a long time since I did this." "Since dinner," he teased. "Since letting someone in." He didn't laugh at that. Instead, he set his glass down and leaned forward slightly. "I don't expect you to trust me overnight, Claire. I just want to know you. Know me. Not fix me. Not save me. Not rush me into something I wasn't ready for. Just know me." I took a deep breath, let my fingers trace the rim of my wine glass, and for the first time in years, I let myself relax. Maybe this didn't have to be terrifying. Maybe for once I could just let something good happen. Letting someone in. One dinner turned into two. Two turned into weekly coffee dates, long walks through the historic streets of Charleston, quiet conversations on my porch after the kids had gone to sleep. Elliot never pushed. He never demanded more than I was ready to give. "I can wait," he said one night, as we sat on my front steps watching the sunset. "For what?" "For you to believe that you deserve this." I looked at him, then really looked at him. At the way his eyes softened when he spoke to me, at the patience in his voice, at the way he treated me as if I wasn't something fragile. "I don't know if I do." "You do." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to take that truth and hold on to it. But old wounds don't heal overnight. And trust is the hardest thing to rebuild. The fear of falling. The night he kissed me for the first time, I almost pulled away. We had been sitting on the porch, the air warm and heavy with the scent of jasmine, the distant sound of waves rolling against the shore. I had been talking about the kids, about how Sophia was excelling in school, how Jacob was still convinced he was going to be a marine biologist, how Lily had called me the other night just to talk, just because she missed me. I had been laughing about something when Elliot reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my face. I froze. I felt his fingertips linger, warm and steady, and suddenly the laughter caught in my throat. "Claire," he murmured. And just like that, every wall I had spent years building threatened to come crashing down. Because I knew what was coming next. And I wasn't sure if I could handle it. His lips were soft, hesitant, asking rather than taking. And for one brief, terrifying moment, I let myself lean in. But then the fear hit. Then my past, my heartbreak, my trauma, all of it rushed in like a flood, drowning me. I pulled away, standing so fast that I nearly knocked over my wine glass. I can't," I whispered. Elliot didn't move. He didn't try to pull me back. He just sat there watching me, something like understanding in his eyes. "Okay," he said simply. "I'm sorry." "You don't have to be sorry. I don't know how to do this." "Then we'll take it slow," he said. Slow. I had never known love like that. Love that was patient. Love that didn't ask for more than I was ready to give. And for the first time I realized something. Maybe love wasn't supposed to be terrifying. Maybe real love was safe. Learning to love again. Elliot didn't kiss me again that night. He didn't even try. Instead, we sat there side by side watching the stars. And slowly, over time, I began to let him in. Not all at once. Not in some grand, sweeping moment of revelation. But in the little things. In the way he held my hand when we walked along the shore. In the way he learned how I took my coffee. How I liked my books stacked. How I needed the sound of rain to fall asleep. In the way he never asked for more than I was willing to give. The first time I told him I loved him, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't planned. We were sitting on my couch, watching some old black and white movie I had forgotten the name of, when the words just slipped out. I love you. Elliot turned to me. His expression unreadable. Say it again, he whispered. I swallowed, my heart racing. I love you. And then he kissed me. And this time I didn't pull away. A future I never thought possible. Falling in love again didn't erase the past. It didn't take away the scars, the wounds, the memories that still surfaced in the quiet moments. But it gave me something I hadn't had in a long time. Hope. For the first time, I wasn't looking back. For the first time, I was looking forward. And it felt like coming home. They say time softens pain. That one day you wake up, and the memories that once cut you like glass have dulled at the edges. That the weight of grief becomes something you can carry without feeling like you might collapse under it. I don't know if that's entirely true. Some wounds never fully heal. Some scars don't fade. But I do know this: eventually, you stop looking at the past like it's the only thing that defines you. For a long time, I thought my story ended the day David broke my heart. I thought my life had been split into two halves, before him and after him. I had spent so many years mourning the woman I used to be that I had convinced myself she was gone forever. But now, as I stood on the back porch of my new home, one I had chosen for myself, one that held no ghosts of my past, I realized something. I was still here. I had survived. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving. I was living. Closing old doors. I hadn't seen David in months. Not outside of the quick exchanges during custody drop-offs, the stiff, polite conversations about the kids, the occasional email about school schedules or doctor's appointments. But one afternoon in early spring, as I was leaving my classroom, my phone buzzed with a message from him. David, can we talk? I stared at the screen for a long time before responding. Me, about the kids? David, no. About us. For a moment I considered ignoring it. I owed him nothing. Whatever we had shared was over. And I had spent too long untangling myself from him to let him pull me back in. But something in me told me to go. Not for him. For me. The conversation we never had. We met at a quiet cafe near the water, the same one where I had once sat across from Elliot, trying to find the courage to tell him my truth. The place felt different now, less like a battlefield and more like neutral ground. David was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table by the window. He looked up as I approached, his expression unreadable. For the first time in years, I wasn't sure what I felt when I saw him. There was no anger, no longing, just acceptance. Thanks for coming, he said as I sat down. What do you need, David? He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. It had more gray than I remembered. I need to apologize. I said nothing, waiting. I've spent a lot of time thinking about what I did to you, to us. And I don't expect forgiveness, Claire. I needed to say it. I hurt you. And I will regret that for the rest of my life. I studied him, searching for sincerity. Why now? Because I see you moving on. And I realized I never gave you closure. I just walked away and expected you to pick up the pieces on your own. He was right. That was exactly what he had done. And what do you expect me to say? I asked, my voice calm. Nothing, he admitted. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. And I wish I could take it back. I took a slow breath, letting his words settle. You can't, I said finally. I know. For the first time since our marriage ended, I saw him not as the man who had broken me, but as a person who had made a mistake that had cost him everything. And I realized something. I didn't hate him anymore. I hope you find happiness, David, I said, standing. His eyes flickered with something, maybe regret, maybe relief. You too. And with that I walked away. And this time I didn't look back. The woman I had become. In the months that followed, life continued in the quiet, beautiful way that it does when you finally let go of what was never meant to stay. I fell deeper into my relationship with Elliot, not in a whirlwind, not in the reckless way I had once fallen for David, but in something softer, something steady. He never asked me to be anything other than exactly who I was. And that was enough. The kids adjusted too. Lily started college, calling me almost every day with stories about her new life. Jacob was growing into a young man, his wild energy channeled into his love for the ocean. And Sophia, sweet, bright Sophia, was thriving. One evening, as I was tucking her into bed, she looked up at me with wide, thoughtful eyes. "Mom." "Yeah, baby. Do you think love lasts forever?" I hesitated, thinking of my past, of my parents, of the man who had broken me and the one who had helped put me back together. "I think love changes," I said carefully. "Sometimes it lasts forever. Sometimes it doesn't. But that doesn't mean it wasn't real." She nodded, as if considering my words, then yawned, curling into her pillow. "I think Elliot loves you forever," she murmured sleepily. I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "I think so too." Looking forward. The night before my wedding, I stood on the beach, the waves rolling and steady and endless, the scent of salt thick in the air. Yes, wedding. To Elliot. It wasn't a grand affair. No white church, no hundreds of guests. Just a small gathering of family and close friends, a ceremony by the ocean, where the past and the future met beneath a sky full of stars. As I stood there watching the tide, I thought about the woman I had been all those years ago, the one who had stood in this same place, broken and lost, convinced that love was something that could never be trusted again. I wanted to reach back through time to tell her what I knew now, that she would heal, that she would love again, that she would find something even stronger than love. She would find herself. Elliot found me there, wrapping his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured. I leaned into him, breathing him in, feeling the steady, certain warmth of his presence. "The past," I admitted, "but not in a bad way." He pressed a kiss to my temple. "We don't have to rush tomorrow, you know? If you need more time, Dash." "No," I interrupted softly, turning to face him. "I don't need more time. I'm ready." His eyes searched mine as if making sure I meant it. "You're sure?" I smiled, reaching up to cup his face. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." And I meant it. Because for the first time in a long, long time, I wasn't looking back. I was looking forward. And the future had never felt so bright.
Claire Reynolds' journey teaches us one of life's most profound truths. What we put into the world always finds its way back to us. Pain and betrayal may shake us to our core, but our choices, our integrity, our resilience, our ability to forgive, shape the life we build from the ruins. Her story reminds us that virtue is never wasted. Even when she was hurt, even when the weight of the past seemed unbearable, Claire chose to move forward with grace. She didn't let bitterness define her. Instead, she embraced healing, love, and the courage to begin again. And in the end, life rewarded her with a love that was steady and true, a love she had always deserved. But perhaps the most powerful lesson is this: goodness prevails. It may take time. It may require patience, sacrifice, and faith in things unseen. But those who remain kind, who choose love over resentment, who seek truth instead of revenge, will always find peace in the end. Now, we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a turning point that reshaped your life? What lessons about love and resilience have you learned from your own journey? Do you believe in second chances? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's create a space for wisdom, encouragement, and reflection. And if Claire's story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Endless Romance, for more heartfelt stories about love, loss, and the beauty of starting over.